Okay, welcome to the video for research methods. This is Dr. Fiala. And this little mini video lecture is about coming up with research ideas. Be sure and also to check out the other video lecture that addresses how to find articles. Okay, so a few things first about my approach to coming up with a research idea. One basic thing, ideas are easy. Easy to come up with lots of ideas. Good ideas, however, are hard. And especially good ideas that are novel. A good research idea that's workable, that's doable, and has not been done before, or still needs to be addressed, can be hard to come up with. It can be pretty frustrating. You think, okay, here's an idea, nobody's ever done it, it's really great, and then you find out, okay, there's already 10 papers on that exact topic, and there's no room for me to kind of add anything to it. And so in this lecture, I want to talk with a variety of ways of coming up with research ideas that will help you find something new and interesting that you can pursue. The first thing would be using deductive reasoning, drawing hypotheses from theories. Take Freud's theory of psychosexual development, for example. It says that boys learn their gender identity. They learn to be masculine because they identify with their father and want to be like him, so that he won't castrate them. Right? It's resolution of the Oedipal complex. So if I'm going to apply deductive reasoning, okay, so that's the theory. I got to think, okay, if that's true, what would happen in the real world? So I think, okay, well, boys raised without fathers might be less masculine than boys raised with fathers, which I don't necessarily think is true, which kind of gets me to my next point that I like to apply when using deductive reasoning, is I think it's easier, for me anyways, to kind of challenge authority, to try to come up with ideas when you disagree with a theory. Try to think of what the theory would say, and then if you think maybe that's not true, and then why might the theory not be true, or what else might explain the things that the theory tries to account for. A related process would be inductive reasoning. So this is kind of working backwards, where you notice some pattern of behavior that can't be accounted for by an established theory, or at least can't be accounted for in a way that's satisfying to you. Kind of a silly example. You go on a few dates with people you met online, Match.com, and you find that each one of them is a huge Doctor Who fan. And so based on these observations, you theorize that people who participate in online dating programs all love science fiction shows. Okay, so this kind of silly example should point out a major flaw when using inductive reasoning is, this approach is limited by the breadth of observations upon which the theory is based. So if you have lots of observations, lots of data, you're going to have a better theory than if you have a limited number of observations, or if you have in any way biased observations that you're using to come up with your theory. Another way of coming up with ideas is looking at when ideas compete. So this is kind of recognizing that sometimes two different theories will offer different explanations for the same phenomena. What you would expect to happen differs depending on which theory you subscribe to. And this is really, when that happens, it's a great opportunity for science to clarify the theoretical picture. So people kind of have supposed this is how it is, and another group said, okay, no, this is how it is. You say, okay, well, let's find out. And when you do that, you go through a process of reconciliation and or synthesis. You might try to determine if one theory is right and the other is wrong. It's kind of a straightforward test, head to head, which one is right. More likely in our field, you're going to try to figure out when or for whom one theory fits better than the other. So probably both of them are right, but they're right under different circumstances. And your research can be aimed at figuring out exactly what those circumstances are. Another good source of research ideas is everyday problems, solving practical problems. A big thing out there right now is the problem with the suicide rate in the military. So all kinds of research questions coming off of that. Why is this such a problem? Why is it a problem now, more of a problem now than before? What are the risk factors for suicide among soldiers? why are the things that they've tried to address this problem not working? You know, what are the barriers to getting care to the people that need it? And whenever there's a real-world problem that you can apply your research to, frequently I think you'll find, at least for me, it's easier to be motivated to get involved in that research project, because you can kind of see that there's something that you're going to be doing with your work product that will hopefully be helpful to people. And again, for most of us in this field, that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing, because we want to help people. Okay, so that's some of the basic stuff for me. Now we'll look over some of the suggestions from Kasdan, which he breaks down into several different categories. The first of which is to play with ideas. And under that he talks about selecting and applying metaphors. You know, and as counselors in training, you're probably pretty comfortable thinking metaphorically. There's a long history of using metaphors in therapy to help clients understand complex concepts. So if you're interested in some phenomenon, some pattern of behavior, and you can think of some metaphor that reflects the concepts involved, you know, it can be a source of ideas if you start tinkering with that metaphor. You know, think about extensions of the metaphor. For example, if you think about depression, you know, think about, okay, well, depression is like carrying a heavy anchor while trying to swim across the sea of life. So we have a metaphor within a metaphor here. Anyway, so, you know, what is the anchor? Maybe it's negative, pessimistic thinking, right? And so, I mean, that's one research question: is, you know, what's the anchor? But I can go further. Why don't they let go of the anchor? You know, wouldn't it be easier to swim if you didn't have the anchor? Which makes you think, okay, there must be some purpose to the anchor. What is that purpose? Well, an anchor in general, if I kind of go back to my metaphor, provides stability in a storm. You know, so the ship doesn't float out of port or wherever it is supposed to be staying put. So, going from metaphor back to depression, maybe negative thinking is used to protect oneself from the storm or, you know, life difficulties. Kind of the idea that, you know, if you expect the worst, then when it happens, it won't be so bad. So now we're getting toward a really a workable research topic. If that's true, then what? Okay, well, do people with depression experience heightened anxiety when you talk about changing their negative cognitions? Because again, using this metaphor, you're talking about taking away their anchor. So if you start talking about doing cognitive psych work with these people, does that cause anxiety? Because somewhere they realize that they're benefiting from that, and they're going to be anxious about giving that safe anchor away. Another approach that I find helpful is to represent ideas graphically. It's especially helpful when trying to think about relationships among variables. Okay, so one example, if we think about looking at a relationship between study time and academic success. All right, so generally, probably relationship between these variables, the more you study, the more successful you might be. Right? So just kind of drawing that relationship out, it's very simple, but now I can start thinking, okay, if I start drawing other things in here, what might that look like? What else could be going on here? So I could imagine an arrow coming up that hits the other arrow, and when that happens, that I'm talking about a moderator variable. So some variable that moderates the relationship between study time and academic success. In this case, I offer example of study method. You know, so yeah, okay, generally study time will lead to academic success, but not always. If you study the wrong way, it doesn't matter how much you study, you're not going to be successful. And the relationship is only true if you have a certain type of study method. You know, so if you're, got your iPod in, you listen to music, and you're chatting, and you're maybe also watching a movie while you're studying, if you're spending hours and hours doing that, may not be successful. So it might help me think of moderator variables. Represented ideas graphically might also help me think of mediator variables. So that's when study time affects or influences some variable, which in turn affects academic success. So it could be the more I study, the more confident I am about my ability to succeed, and then that confidence translates into success, which I may be missing another variable here. Maybe the confidence then reduces test anxiety or performance anxiety when writing a paper, and then I turn out a better product and am more successful. As I look at these arrows now, I could even think, okay, I could draw another arrow, kind of a feedback loop from academic success to study time, such that people who are successful are going to study more. So study time may be influenced by success. But then as I draw that arrow in my mind's eye, I can imagine another arrow coming in, hitting that one, where it's moderated by whether or not they attribute their success to study time. So if you attribute your success to study time, then yes, people who are more successful will study more. But if you attribute your success to, oh, I'm just really smart, then being more successful won't necessarily lead to more studying, and being less successful won't necessarily lead to less studying. Okay. Another way to play with ideas would be to change the scale. And this is, letting yourself think of unrealistic proportions with regard to the relationships among variables. And this might lead you to thinking of these relationships in new ways. Some examples to help kind of clarify this. With our kind of studying example, how much would you need to study in order to have perfect academic success? So think of this kind of unrealistic proportion. You can't have. There's no such thing as perfect academic success, but I kind of put that out there. And when I do, I think, well, what is perfect academic success? And I think, well, what exactly do I mean by academic success? And that might lead me down a whole nother road of research. Another way of thinking about it, if there were absolutely no study time, so zero study time, which is unrealistic because everybody's going to study some, what would I expect academic success to be? I probably wouldn't expect it to be zero. So this leads me to think about what else contributes to academic success other than study time. And these are all other kind of potential research questions. The last thing under play with ideas is attend to process. And this is something that you as a student of psychology probably already do better than some students in other fields. Our focus in psychology counseling is frequently more on process than on content. So not what happened, but what's happening as things are developing. And one way to really kind of push this, as is suggested in Kasdan that I like, is to talk about some of your concepts which seem kind of like nouns as verbs. So again, for example, instead of trying to think about what leads to academic success, with that being some sort of state of being, think about what leads to academic succeeding. Right? So it's kind of an active thing. And this thinking of it this way reminds us that success isn't a final state. And that may lead me to think about a research question related to maybe how succeeding at one point in time influences succeeding at later points in time. So thinking about it dynamically may lead me down a whole nother path than I would have gone down otherwise. The next thing that Kasdan talks about is to consider the context. And within that, a couple of things. One, place specific problems in a large domain. This is pretty straightforward. Thinking about a broader context, might help you realize areas that haven't been addressed in the research literature yet. Again, sticking with our example for now, probably thinking about studying in academic success, you're thinking about doing a study in a particular school. So what if we broaden our thinking to include all schools in the U.S. education system, or globally, all schools anywhere in the world? Okay, so the idea that comes when I start thinking along those lines is, might there be cultural differences in how studying influences academic success? So maybe studying a certain way, rote memorization may work really well in one region with one kind of set of cultural mores, but might not work so well somewhere else due to these other kind of cultural variables. Another thing about considering context would be, make comparisons outside the problem domain, which is similar to the previous point, just a little different. So instead of just broadening our scope, looking in really different areas. So instead of thinking about school settings, even global school settings, what about things outside of school settings altogether? What's the relationship between studying and success, maybe not academic success, in terms of actors trying to learn their lines, or welders trying to learn their craft, and does that process work the same way in those contexts as it does in the academic context? And if not, Why not? What's the difference? And again, research questions start popping up. The next thing, examine processes in the settings in which they naturally occur. And this is just about getting out of the lab, because a lot of research that's done is done in a lab setting, and sometimes our lab, and I'm kind of doing air quotes right now, which you can't see, but our lab is a classroom of college sophomores taking surveys about what they think they would do, right, or how they think things are. So this is about going out into the real world and making some observations about how whatever process you're interested in. So with our example, going to Starbucks or the library and watching students study and kind of gathering information from that to come up with ideas about what you might do, which again would be kind of using inductive reasoning, kind of looking for patterns amongst data in the real world. Another aspect of this that Kasdan talks about is to consider practical implications of research. This is if you've been doing basic research that's not made for any application. It might be helpful to imagine how it might be applied to a real world setting. So if you're doing research on how differences in ambient light affect information processing, a very kind of basic research thing, you could apply this to studying. So the people studying more effective in bright rooms, dim rooms, comfortably lit rooms. What is a comfortably lit room? So applying that basic research to real-world settings can help you come up with different ideas. And the last thing under consider context is probe library resources. And this reflects the idea that a really good way to get a solid understanding of the contextual variables related to your research idea is to just start reading. Go to the databases and see what's been done, what's been written. Again, in the other video that I'm posting, I'll give you some tips on how to use these databases in case you're not familiar with them already. Okay, the next thing that is talked about in Kasdan is to probe and tinker with assumptions. First thing being expose hidden assumptions. Most of the things that we know or that we think we know are based on assumptions that we just gloss over. Right? And sometimes it's helpful to try to identify what these assumptions are, because a new research idea might involve examining how or when those assumptions are true, or maybe not true. Example, the belief that studying leads to greater academic success assumes that the measures of academic success that we're talking about, I mentioned grading earlier, reflects learning. Right? That's kind of an assumption that's inherent in that idea. Okay, the more you study, you're going to learn this stuff, and that's going to show up in your success. And is that true? Does your grade always indicate how much you learned in a class? Maybe not, because there's probably other things that influence your grade beyond your own learning. And I could research and try to figure out what those things are and what role they play. Another one would be to make the opposite assumption. This is all about challenging existing assumptions, kind of like I talked about before about challenging authority. Subject these assumptions to empirical evaluation. Here, there's an assumption that academic success is a good thing, right? Is that true? And in what way is it true? Do people who get higher grades, make more money than other people that get lower grades? Do they report greater happiness later in life? Is this the kind of a goal we should strive toward, or that we want to strive toward? That's an empirical question. Okay, the last thing under this one would be to simultaneously doubt and trust the same assumption. And usually this involves assuming that a theory is generally true. So you're trusting a general assumption, but you understand that there may be instances where it's not true. So again, studying is good in general, but maybe it's not always good. Maybe even sometimes it's harmful or detrimental. So in what instances might spending large amounts of time studying negatively impact your academic success? Okay. The next thing that's talked about in Kasdan is to clarify and systematize the conceptual framework. And a couple things here, which I think are good. to scrutinize the meanings of key concepts. And this is just kind of a favorite of mine because I really like etymology and kind of the roots of words. So you're typically working with some set of terms. And if you kind of can stop and think about what these words mean, how they're being used, maybe even where they come from, that might lead you to some other research ideas. So an example, get away from studying for a little bit, think about if you're doing research on aggression. So if we try to look at that word and where it comes from, break it down to Latin roots maybe. The first part is A, meaning to or toward, right? And then the aggression comes from, can't remember, pluperfect something form of the word gradus, which means step. So basically aggression is step toward or step to, right? Which is kind of ironic given that some of our more recent languages, are you going to step to somebody as a way of being aggressive? But anyway, so if aggression is about stepping to someone, I might start thinking, well, can you be aggressive by withdrawing from contact, which some people would classify as passive aggression. So just thinking about where this word comes from might lead me to new ideas. Another one which overlaps with what we talked before about depicting things graphically is specify relationships among concepts. This is again where you're just kind of writing out all the variables that you're interested in and then start drawing lines with arrows connecting them. And not all the arrows will be unidirectional. There may be two variables where A influences B and B influences A. Or maybe that A influences B and B influences A, but B only influences A when C is present, right? And if you can kind of start trying to draw those things out, you might find one piece of that kind of large conceptual map of relationships among variables that hasn't been studied enough, and you can kind of carve out your own niche of kind of novel research. And then the next thing that Kevin talks about is kind of a big step: write a concept paper. And this kind of recognizes that the act of writing engages parts of your brain that aren't activated in the same way when you're simply thinking about a problem or about a subject. Sometimes the process of writing about a topic will lead you to think about it in a new or different way. And this is something that actually I see a lot in teaching research methods when students decide to change their topics after they've started writing, because as they're writing, they're understanding the things better and also differently, and they'll realize, oh no, this is actually what I want to look at. And this is one reason I really, I think trying to make a solid outline early on is a good idea, because when you're trying to get ideas down on paper and wrestle with that, it will help you think more clearly about what you're doing, and it may change the idea that you're looking at. Okay. Wrapping up, just a few final thoughts about coming up with a research idea. I think it's important to choose a topic you care about, so find your passion. It's going to make it much easier to spend the amount of time that you need to spend to do this well if it's something you care about. If you used to, well, I think it'll be easy to do this, it'll be easy to find information, easy to write about. Well, there are some things that are easier to find information about, but in terms of being easy to write about, things are easy to write about when you're interested in writing about them and interested in thinking about them. So don't be afraid to do something maybe a little challenging if it's something that really kind of gets you excited and you care about. The next one, think and don't think. This is just a way of saying, don't try to sit down and come up with an idea in one sitting where you just think. So think about your idea for a while, try and come up with something, and then stop. Go do something else, and then come back to it. Your brain's going to keep working away on the idea in the background, even when you aren't actually actively trying to get one. In doing this, not putting so much pressure on yourself to come up with an idea in one sitting will hopefully help keep you from feeling frustrated, because it can be frustrating, especially when you think you have a good idea and you find out somebody's done your exact study the exact way you wanted to do it, and now you can't really do that. And then the last thing, don't keep it a secret. Talk with other people about your idea as you're developing it. And this could be other classmates, family and friends, email me, let me know what you're thinking about. Sometimes a good sounding board is what you need to spring toward a really great idea. And it's still your idea. It's just maybe one thing somebody gives you in feedback will go, oh, actually, I see what you're saying, but no, I want to do this. And it's still your idea and you still own it, but you got there by bouncing off of somebody else. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Be sure again and look at the other one about finding articles, and good luck coming up with your research ideas.